Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ahmed AZZAZ and I welcome you to this presentation entitled Hydrothermal Carbonization and Slow Pyrolysis as two thermal techniques for the production of carbon-rich added value materials using olive milling byproduct, Quid optimus. This research work was elaborated in Institution des Matériaux de Mulhouse and financed by the European Committee in the framework of Fertishar project. Olive oil production is considered as a very important and strategic agricultural sector to a significant number of Mediterranean countries. The related working force was estimated by 5.8 million people, generating 35.2 billion euros in assets in 2017. However, the production of olive oil leads generally to the generation of undesirable byproducts. In fact, in the case where the three-phase milling process is applied, milling plants generate high amounts of solid and liquid wastes, named olive pomace and olive mill waste water respectively. These wastes are known for their extreme polluting capacity, which encouraged the scientists and decision makers to find methods for their treatments. Few techniques were applied for this problem, such as membrane filtration, coagulation, flocculation, biological treatment, and electrocoagulation. However, these techniques are known for their excessive use of chemical products, highly expensive, and limited treatment yields, and finally the production of toxic byproducts such as sludge and adsorbates, which needs us to find a sustainable technique for the treatment of these wastes. In our current research work, we will be interested solely in the solid wastes, namely raw olive pomace generated after the production of olive oil, in order to take full advantage of its possible nutrients and carbon content. This biomass will be transformed into a rich carbon material using two thermal methods, namely hydrothermal carbonization and slow pyrolysis. This approach was followed notably in the aim of a generation process to agricultural use. So the used biomass, the raw olive pomace, was collected from a local olive mill plant at the region of Tuta, Tunisia. It was naturally air-dried for a week, then stored in bags for further use. The hydrochars were prepared as follows. The deionized water was added to raw olive pomace at a ratio of 1:9, where 1 gram of feedstock and 9 milliliters of deionized water. The mixture was then inserted in a 100 milliliter high-pressure autoclave, and the effective temperature was monitored at 180, 200, and 220 degrees Celsius. As for slow pyrolysis carbonization setup, the biochar was produced as follows. 3 grams of raw pomace were placed in a porcelain crucible and introduced in tubular furnace reactor. Then argon flow was supplied continuously at room temperature during 30 minutes in order to remove residual oxygen. Then the temperature increased to the setting value, as it is 400, 500, and 600 degrees Celsius in a range of 5 degrees Celsius per minute under argon flow rate of 6 normal liters per hour. Then the sample was maintained during 1 hour as at desired temperature, then cooled naturally under argon flow. Both hydrochar and biochars were then weighted and stored in flasks for further analysis. In order to characterize the produced chars, multiple techniques were employed, namely thermogravimetric and proximate analysis, elemental analysis, infrared surface chemistry and for the characterization of the surface, and scanning electron microscope for physical surface properties. So we start with the proximate and yield analysis. Initially, proximate analysis was performed to determine the macro composition of the produced hydrocharge in terms of volatile matter, fixed carbon, and ash contents. So the results presented here suggest that the carbonization of raw olive pomace at relatively low temperatures in case of the hydrothermal carbonization led to higher solid yields. In fact, the final carbonization yield of hydrocharge was estimated between 55% and 38% for treatments between 180 and 200 degrees Celsius respectively. This could be attributed to the low effect of heat and the presence of water in form of liquid and vapor that reduces the possible solid losses in form of volatile matter. On the other hand, pyrolysis of the raw olive pomace at high temperatures stimulated the elimination of volatile matter and the degradation of the lignocellulosic matrix, which resulted in lower solid yields between 38% and 30% for pyrolysis temperatures between 400 degrees Celsius and 600 degrees Celsius respectively. So these findings were further confirmed when performing the proximate analysis. Raw olive pomace initially presented high value of volatile matter and low content in fixed carbon. When increasing hydrothermal carbonization temperature, a decrease in the volatile matter was noted due to the condensation of carbon content, which explains the increase in fixed carbon percentages. This tendency was further amplified when changing the carbonization process here. The carbon was up to 71% of the samples at 500 degrees Celsius, with a reduced volatile matter content of about 13%. It suggests that pyrolysis at relatively high temperatures is better process to condensate carbon content and eliminate volatile matter. It could also be remarked that the content in ash has followed different tendencies for two types of shards, as it decreased for hydrocharge from 15 to 11% and decreased from 9 to 16% for respective increasing carbonization temperatures. Such behavior is attributed to the minerals migration mechanism during the carbonization process. So, to have a preliminary idea on the surface chemistry of the produced carbonaceous materials, infrared analysis was performed for feedstocks and produced charts, and the results were presented in this figure. In this case, the hydrothermal carbonization. So the infrared specters suggest that the presence of 5 relative peaks that showed the most significant profile changes, namely hydroxyl, carboxylic, aromatic CC, carbonyl, and aromatic CH. So for hydrocharges, in this figure, peaks corresponding to hydroxyl groups decreased in intensity while increasing carbonization temperature. It has been reported that this decrease indicates the tendency of the hydrothermal carbonization towards dehydration. In case an increase in the peak transition was detected when increasing carbonization temperature between 180 and 200 degrees Celsius related to the vibration of hemicellulosic aromatic structure. Similar behavior was noticed for aromatic CC functional groups, where related peak shifted by minus 16 centimeter to the minus 1 for the same treatment temperature. This could be attributed to the stretching aromatic skeletal of the lignin matrix. So different behavior actually was spotted for the biochars. In fact, the broad peak between 3,800 and 3,200 per centimeter has disappeared totally, even at low temperatures. Furthermore, both aromatic and aliphatic functional groups between 3,000 and 200 and 2,700 were gradually eliminated until reaching a pyrolysis temperature of about 500 degrees Celsius. This could be attributed to the slow degradation of cellulose and hemicellulose. So, according to the researchers, in case of an initial abundance in the functionalities, this behavior is attributed to the pyrolysis mechanism towards the condensation of carbon in the solid fraction and the release of oxygen in form of CO2 gases. So, the intense modification of the chemical and physical modification endured by the feedstock during hydrothermal carbonization and slow pyrolysis led to significant changes in terms of structural and morphological characteristics of the produced shards. The scanning electron microscope images presented in this figure emphasized on the heterogeneous aspect of both feedstocks and produced shards at different temperatures. Mainly, raw olive pomace was characterized with a heterogeneous and kinky surface with the absence of any significant porosity. When performing the hydrothermal carbonization, so the pictures on the left, we found that some spherical structures appeared for the samples of 180 rope and 200 rope. So these structures are issued from the repolymerization and the recombination of cellulose and hemicellulose degradation by byproducts, leading to the formation of carbon nanonuclei with a hydrophobic outer structure and a hydrophilic core. These morphologies end up by disappearing at increasing carbonization temperature, which is in this case 220 degrees Celsius, due to the enhancement in the reaction severity caused by the increase in acid byproducts generation. So conversely, the bioshards, so the pictures on the right, showed a rather porous structure with more uniform and less rugged surface. In fact, increase in heating intake causes a loss in mass, mainly in the form of volatile matter, so which confirms the results presented in the first figure. These emissions lead to a disproportional amount of volume contraction. Accordingly, the proportion of highly disordered aromatic carbon increases inside the amorphous structure in the case of the hydrothermal carbonization. When shifting to slow pyrolysis, aromatic carbon starts to grow into conjugated, structurally arranged aromatic carbon, leading to the formation of pores, mainly in the form of slits. So, as a conclusion, the production of shards at different temperatures was performed through hydrothermal carbonization and slow pyrolysis. Significant final solid yield suggests the possible production of hydroshards at higher masses with low carbonization temperatures. The presence of functional groups at the surface could lead to their effective application in the removal of pollutants in the aqueous and or gaseous media, and high content in fixed carbon and low percentage of volatile matter for bioshards makes their employment as fertilizers more interesting in order to ensure a long-term and effective sequestration of carbon in porous media. And at the end, I would like to thank you for your attention.